how does the next step of restoration happen? In other words, when the person does see this, and they're now made aware of it, you know, the question I always heard in business was, okay, so what?
Yep. Oh yeah, because many a times I'm sure people in the audience are going, okay, what? Like, give me something. Like, give me something I can take home. And I think it goes back to the survivor, where I'll tell them that you have to trust that if I'm sending you to a referral, especially when cancer treatment's done, you're exhausted. You don't want to see us anymore. I get it. You know, you just like, you kind of want a break from healthcare. Okay, I get it. But I say to survivors, I know you're tired and I know you've seen a lot of people, but by picking out what your worry is, one lady, I just want to have a little bit more strength because I'm so tired, Michelle. I get it. So how about I have you see a physical therapist for strength? You know, and some people will say, you know, no, right now I don't want that. Okay, because it's making that decision about what do they want to do and not do. Most of them will come back to me because they'll say, I feel like I'm not making it over a speed bump. Like I feel like I got to this certain point, but I'm not quite there. So I say, okay, are you ready now? Are you ready for me to send you to somebody that could possibly help or give you some direction? And it's really taking the responsibility of getting that coaching and applying that coaching. So I go back to survivor responsibilities a lot of times, you know, that I'm here, I can help you, and I'm going to tell you what will be helpful for you, but it's all about you doing it. Does that make sense? So yeah. It's all about, if I'm going to give you exercises to do at home, because you say you're exhausted, there's research all over the place that says if you have some kind of activity during therapy, and people look at me like, are you kidding me? Like, I can't get off the couch. I said, I know, but if you figure out your day, sometimes morning you have more energy than afternoon. So if you got an hour of energy in the morning, you need to use it. Your body wants to move, even though you don't feel like you want to move. The research shows that if you move, if your nutrition is good, if you sleep well, the fatigue is better, okay? So many times they look at you like, are you crazy? And I said, give me a week. Give me a week that you're gonna dedicate this. You're gonna try this. And you know, compliance, we're human. So, you know, I always say, guess what? When I get a course of antibiotics, do I always at the end of my antibiotic course have a couple days left? Hello? I mean, come on. I mean, our human nature is that you get powered up and you do it for a while and then you kind of lax back and then you power up again. That's normal, okay? But how do we find that balance?
I think along the lines, another thing that I thought was very strange as a dynamic that happens is you create a cancer world.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You know, and you have different worlds. You have a work world, you have a family world, you may have a marriage world, you may have a church world, you may have a community group world, a hobby world, but now all of a sudden you got a new world. Mm-hmm. How do you get out of that cancer world?
Well, there's two ways to look at this, I guess, as I help people deal with it. I think some of the reports that came out about lost in transition was that patients felt like we celebrated as health professionals, yay, you're done. And they're in this world of people that get it, you know, that us that do this all day long and help you journey through it. We understand. You don't have to explain yourself to us. And when you're going through treatment, you have this power force of people around you, and then when you're done with treatment, they say, yay, you're going to every 3 months or every 6 months. And you're like, what? You know, because the people that you don't have to explain yourself to, because we get it and we're in your world, are there. Same with cancer survivors. Do I think that people should get 100% out of it? Not really, but the transition to your world, the rest of the world, because I hear this from survivors all the time, is, Michele, you know, I get out of my treatment, I go back to work, and either people avoid me because they don't know what to say, or they are over-doubting, or they don't, you know, they want to talk about it all the time, or they think that it's over, it's done, and you look normal and you look like everything's fine, so you're the old person that you used to be, although the survivor says, no, I'm not. There's a lot of things. A really great story was this man who, it was a backhoe driver. He drove a backhoe. You know, he said, every scoop of dirt is different, you know. But he came in one day for a survivorship visit, and he said, I almost went postal, you know, I almost went crazy at this person in Walmart because I was standing in line, and the lady in front of me was ridiculing and being rude and not being nice to the poor cashier. And I'm thinking to myself how angry I am over this. And he goes, well, why? And I said, because you're a cancer survivor. Your perspective has changed, that what that person was angry about was minor compared to life itself. I mean, what you experienced. And your anger was more towards that person and not being aware of how precious life is and how really simple that is. And so he goes, okay, and he got up and left. I was like, that was the shortest visit I've ever had, you know. So I guess I more coach patients into how do you face adversity? How do you face transitioning back in? What are your expectations, yourself, of the people around you, of yourself transitioning into your life? There's many times that what people did prior to a diagnosis, they can't do anymore. Mm-hmm. And that loss again, you know, kind of that sense of loss. And I think it was great when he was talking about we live in sequences. You know, I think we live in this perspective of sometimes we have this projection of, you know, in 5 years from now, and cancer kind of shoves that back and says, in 2 days from now, you know, and it's that perspective of kind of fitting into that. So I always tell people, even when they go for a second opinion, what is your expectation? What is your personal expectation of yourself and the others? And how do you cause that communication to be processed either personally, verbally, non-verbally, whatever? And it's hard. It's complicated. But it's talking through, you're getting ready to go back into your life. What's your expectation, and how do you verbalize that to the people around you? How do you verbalize that you still have needs, wants, fears? And then how do you open it up for them to discuss the needs, fears, and wants from the people that are in your life? Because a lot of times, caregivers want you to be back to normal because they're scared. They're scared too, in their own way. They're scared of the unknown. They're scared of, I want to be hopeful and I want to think that that's past us and we're over here, but I still have this fear. And it's just a lot of nonverbals.
We should just go have a conversation, because I could learn a lot just listening to Michele at the stage I'm at. I think back to probably the first 2 months after my diagnosis, and that's when I had some global infection because of the white blood cells and the red blood cells being attacked by the chemo drugs. I ended up in intensive care. But I remember when I came home, I always kept thinking, well, okay, now I'm past that, so I'm going to get better. And then you go for your next chemo treatment, and it's like, wow, this is all over again. I found that, and this is the reason why MajorHOPE is called MajorHOPE. We have an English bulldog by the name of Major. And he always pulled me out of the cancer world. His mission in life was, okay, John's home, he plays with me, and he gives me treats. And he was tenacious about that. And no matter how tired I was, how sick I was, how lazy I was, it didn't matter. He was coming at me. And I'd get frustrated. And yeah, the anger would be there until I started playing and I realized he didn't know what he was doing. He's just a dog. But he pulled me out of the cancer world every day, probably 2 or 3 times for 20 minutes. And I thought, what an interesting concept for a caregiver. Of how do you pull somebody out of the doldrums of that day? What do you do? And I would watch Major. And Major was a kind of bulldog where he's not mean. He loves everybody, and he expects everybody to love him. And I thought, you know, if I was just like that, if I loved everybody I met and expected to be loved, what would my life change like? And it helped me look, now that you're explaining your model there, of how I would get out of things and what would bother me. Major has learned to eat everything I would eat. I don't know how long it was, about 2 months. The only thing I ate was red licorice and cucumbers. It's the only thing that tasted anything like food. And he did the same thing. And I thought, you know what? He's meeting me where I'm at. And I thought, you know, as a caregiver or as a survivor, it's like building a bridge. You got 2 ends that are being built to the middle. And how do we get to the middle? And both of us have to build. So you've given me a lot to think about, to realize that, you know, there is life beyond cancer and there's living well beyond cancer, because most of the people I ran into being cancer-free now, they just thought it was an event. Okay, it's done now, let's move on. I thought it was an event. I underestimated all the long-term side effects, and yet I watched Major, and he didn't care if it was the first sequence or the last sequence. He was going to pull me out of the cancer world. My oncologist, Dr. Dean, told me, he says, what can you do? I said, what do you mean? He says, well, do you write? Do you sing? Do you listen to music? Do you paint? What can you do to do something extra? And then I start reading about this of, you know, how do you get yourself balanced again? Where you have a life instead of just saying, well, I wonder if I'm going to die today, or if I feel that sick, and can I even get out of bed or whatever? And you start doing these things. I remember the first time I wrote on Caring Bridge, it took me 2 hours to write a paragraph. Talk about chemo brain. But after a while, I ended up writing a book. Now, it had to be rewritten 7 times over the last year because it was a mess the first time you got through it. But the concept was there. There's times you fight the disease, but there's also other times that you just have to follow. And now that I see this model here, and we've talked about this before, so it's not new, but it's almost like today I had an epiphany. So I hope I could share that with you, that you may not have an epiphany today, but there are things that you could be looking at in your life to say, what do I need to do to adjust? How do I get out of my cancer world, or whatever world you're in, where you're saying, you know what, I hate being in that world all the time. How do I not necessarily escape, but take 1 foot out of there?